I left the man who chose me for the one who never did. I don't know if writing this will make the guilt smaller, or if it will just carve the truth deeper into me, but I think I passed the point of being able to keep it all inside. Some people lose the love of their life to tragedy. I lost mine by choice, worse, by arrogance. I threw away the man who chose me every single day for the man who had never once stayed. And now I lie awake more nights than I sleep, rehearsing the moment I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. His name was Daniel. My ex-fiancé, the one I left. Even saying ex-fiancé feels like a lie, because that title belongs to men who got to walk away by mutual breakup, or by some failing on both sides. What I did to him was not a breakup, it was abandonment in the purest sense of the word. And I did it in the cruelest way, not because he hurt me, not because he failed me, but because I thought I deserved something more, or maybe I thought I was missing out on something I had romanticized for too long. We were together for 5 years. He proposed to me on a rainy afternoon in March, in our tiny kitchen with burnt pancakes on the stove and his hands shaking so much I thought he'd drop the ring. There wasn't some grand gesture planned. He just blurted it out in the middle of laughing about how awful his cooking was. And I said yes so fast he didn't even finish asking. I remember grabbing his face, kissing him so hard we both tasted burnt sugar and smoke. I remember thinking, this is the safest feeling in the world. And I threw it away. Not for some stranger. Not for some new adventure. But for my ex-boyfriend Ethan. The ghost that haunted the corners of my memory, not because he was good to me, but because he was the one who left me before I could leave him. And I think, if I'm brutally honest, that was the hook. There was still a part of me, small, ugly, pathetic, that wanted him to choose me the way Daniel already did. I couldn't stand that someone who once had my heart walked away without looking back. So when he reappeared, like some echo from a bad song, I listened. I wish I could say it was a sudden thing, like he showed up at my door and swept me into a moment of panic and nostalgia I couldn't resist. But it wasn't like that. It was slower. Sicker. More deliberate. We ran into each other at a mutual friend's birthday. I remember the moment I saw him across the room, the tilt of his head, that lazy half smile, hands in his pockets like nothing in life could bother him. My stomach twisted the way it used to, and even then, even in that very first instant, I think some dark part of me lit up and whispered, he's back. He hugged me like no time had passed. Asked about my life. I told him I was engaged. He didn't flinch. He smiled and said, lucky guy, and whether he meant it or not, that seed was planted suddenly. I needed to know if he was lying, if it bothered him, if he still saw me as something he could have. If I still had some hold on him. It was vanity disguised as unfinished business. He texted me a few days later. Just something stupid. Something like, crazy seeing you again. You look exactly the same. And instead of ignoring it, I responded. That was the first betrayal. The smallest one, but the most important. Daniel never doubted me. He trusted me with his whole soul. When my phone buzzed and I said, oh, it's just Ethan, ran into him at the party, Daniel didn't question it. He smiled and said, tell him I said hi, because he didn't have that fear in him. I was his home, and he believed he was mine. I started meeting Ethan for coffee. Then drinks. Then dinners I pretended were catch ups, nostalgia, closure. But it wasn't that. It was me feeding that sick curiosity. Would he want me now that I was someone else's future? Daniel would cook dinner and ask me about my day, and I would lie with such ease I hate myself for it. Work was fine, I'd say. Traffic was awful. My mom called. I left out the parts where Ethan told me he missed me. Where he leaned in too close. Where he said things like, I always knew we weren't really over. We were over. He made sure of that years ago when he ended things over voicemail. But my heart didn't care about facts. It cared about ego. It cared about the version of me he had left behind. The night I crossed the line from emotional betrayal to physical, I remember everything with cinematic clarity. The bar was dark. The music was low. He touched my wrist and I didn't pull away. He told me he thought about me more than he should, and I believed him because I wanted to. I followed him outside. He kissed me against a brick wall like no time had passed, like we were still reckless and young and unfinished. And I kissed him back like I didn't already belong to someone better. When I got home that night, Daniel was asleep on the couch, waiting for me with the TV still playing some documentary we had started together. He had a blanket pulled halfway over him, glasses still on, and my heart cracked in a way I didn't understand yet. I remember standing there thinking, I haven't lost him yet. I can still fix this. I can still pretend. And for a while, I did. But affairs, emotional or physical, are not stains you can hide. They leak. They reek. They warp everything around them. I became distant without meaning to. I checked my phone too much. I compared every stable, patient thing Daniel did with every chaotic little thrill Ethan offered. And I started telling myself lies, that maybe I wasn't meant for quiet love. That maybe passion and damage were the same thing as destiny. That maybe comfort was just another word for settling. The worst part? Ethan never promised anything. He never said, leave him and I'll build a life with you. He just said enough to keep me hooked. Enough to let me ruin my own life while he sat back and watched. I think the moment everything truly tipped was when Ethan said, so casually it felt rehearsed, do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together? He said it while tracing the rim of his glass with his thumb, eyes half-lidded like it didn't cost him anything to ask. And I, like an idiot, told him yes. I told him I thought about it sometimes. I didn't mention that those thoughts were fleeting sparks I used to snuff out with gratitude for the life I had with Daniel. Because by then, I'd already started feeding them. The engagement ring on my finger started to feel heavier, not with meaning, but with guilt. Instead of reminding me that I was loved, it reminded me that I was lying. And instead of taking that as a sign to stop, I twisted it into resentment. I told myself Daniel deserved someone more exciting. Someone more passionate. Someone who didn't feel restless. I convinced myself that maybe I didn't really love him enough. That maybe love wasn't supposed to feel safe. That maybe the reason I was so easily pulled back into Ethan's orbit was because something was missing in the life I'd built. Looking back now, I know exactly what was missing: self-awareness, gratitude, maturity, the ability to see the difference between love and nostalgia, the ability to recognize addiction disguised as desire. The day I ended it with Daniel wasn't cinematic. There were no suitcases, no shouting, no dramatic affair reveal. Just a conversation at our kitchen table, the same place he'd asked me to marry him. The same place he'd burned pancakes while trying to make me breakfast. The same place I'd once cried laughing over nothing because I felt so lucky. He knew something was coming before I spoke. I saw it in the way he folded his hands. The way his eyes softened but went still, like he was bracing for impact. I told him I needed space. That I was confused. That I didn't know if marriage was the right step right now. Every excuse was a shard of glass, and I handed them to him like they were flowers. He just looked at me for a long time. The kind of look that holds up a mirror you can't hide from. And then he asked, quietly, is there someone else? I hesitated. That was all the answer he needed. His face broke without a sound. I think that will haunt me more than anything. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He didn't accuse me or chase me or list out all the things he'd done for me. His pain was silent, dignified, deep. Like he'd just been handed a terminal diagnosis. He stood up, nodded once, and said, I won't make this harder for you. Then he walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and didn't come out until I was gone. I didn't pack everything that day. I took a bag, some clothes, my toiletries. I told myself we might take a break and figure things out later. That this wasn't the end, just space to think. But deep down, I knew that wasn't what was happening. I was already mentally with Ethan, already fantasizing about some rush of validation that would make the guilt worth it. I texted Ethan that night. I told him I'd left. I expected something: excitement, relief, longing, anything resembling reciprocation. Instead he responded with, "Wow. Didn't think you'd actually do it. You sure? You'd think that would have been my wake-up call. That I'd feel sick, realize what I'd thrown away, run back home and beg for another chance. But ego is a powerful drug. And shame can make you double down instead of turn back." So I told him yes, I was sure. And he just wrote back, "All right. Let's hang out tomorrow and talk." Not, "I've missed you." Not, "We'll figure this out together." Just casual convenience. Tomorrow. Talk. Daniel didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't chase me. And that silence was the first cut of many I wouldn't fully feel until much later. I moved into a sublet with a girl I barely knew. I quit wedding planning. I took off the ring. I called my mother and told her we'd mutually decided to take time apart. I deleted photos. I pretended the emptiness was freedom. Meanwhile, Ethan oscillated between attention and distance. Some days, he'd kiss me like I was oxygen. Other days, he'd cancel plans with 2-word texts. I started to feel the familiar panic again, the same one I used to feel when we were younger and he'd disappear for days only to reappear when it suited him. Except this time, I'd burned my life down to be available when he did. I waited for him to suggest we move in together. He didn't. I waited for him to introduce me to friends as his girlfriend. He never used the word. I waited for him to take ownership of the destruction he helped set in motion. He didn't even acknowledge it existed. 3 months after I left Daniel, I ran into his sister at a grocery store. She didn't yell. She didn't sneer. She just looked at me like I was a storm that had passed and left the house standing but gutted. She said quietly, "You didn't just break his heart. You took the part of him that believed he'd finally been chosen." I cried that night, not from remorse, but from the crack in my delusion. Because the first tendrils of truth were wrapping around me, Ethan hadn't chosen me. He'd just let me orbit him again. And I'd mistaken proximity for destiny. But the real collapse came later, much later, when the fantasy fully rotted. The moment things truly began to unravel wasn't loud. It didn't come with some dramatic confrontation or explosive betrayal. It was quieter than that, almost anticlimactic. Like the sound of a balloon deflating instead of popping. It happened on a Sunday morning. We'd spent the night at Ethan's apartment. Well, not really spent the night, more like I slept there after he texted me at 11 p.m. with a half-hearted "You up?" I remember waking up early because his bed was too firm and his room was freezing. He was still asleep, face buried in the pillow. For the first time, I didn't feel butterflies or adrenaline. I felt out of place. Like I was trespassing in a life that wasn't meant to include me. His phone lit up on the nightstand. I didn't mean to look, but I did. A preview of a message from someone named Amber Canada flashed across the screen. I don't remember the exact words, but it was something intimate, something familiar. Something I used to send him once upon a time, when I was the one on the outside hoping to be allowed in. I didn't wake him. I didn't ask who she was. I didn't storm out dramatically. I just lay back down and stared at the ceiling, and in that dull, icy moment I realized I had made the exact same mistake twice. I fell in love with a man who treated me like an option, except this time I sacrificed the man who had made me his choice. I didn't confront him that morning. I didn't even tell him I saw it. I just got dressed, kissed him goodbye because I still didn't know how to stop performing the version of myself he responded to, and went home to the sublet that still smelled like vanilla candles and old carpet. That night I dreamed of Daniel. Not a memory, something my mind invented to punish me. In the dream, he was sitting across from me at our old kitchen table, looking at me the way he used to, soft, certain, patient. Except this time, when I reached for him, he pulled his hand away. And then he stood up and walked out the door, just like I did to him. When I woke up, my pillow was wet. I don't even remember crying in my sleep, but apparently I had. I think that's when the shame started, not the guilt, but the shame. Guilt is about what you've done. Shame is about who you are. And for the first time, I started to see myself the way a stranger might, not as someone torn between two loves, not as someone following her heart, but as someone who blew up the safe harbor someone built for her so she could chase the ghost ship of a man who never asked her to. But even then, I didn't leave Ethan. I clung to the corpse of what I thought we could be because admitting there was nothing there meant admitting I burned my life down for nothing. The real breaking point came 5 months after I left Daniel. I remember the exact day, June 18th. I had gone to Ethan's place after work. I was wearing the sweater he used to say he liked on me. I brought a bottle of wine. I was trying, in some desperate, pathetic way, to make us into something real. To justify the wreckage behind me. When I got there, he wasn't alone. She was sitting on his couch. The same couch I'd slept on. The same couch I'd cried into when I first left Daniel. She was laughing at something on his phone. Her legs were tucked underneath her comfortably. She had a key clipped to her jeans. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't jump up or scramble or act caught. He just blinked and said, "Oh hey. I thought we said Thursday." We hadn't. We'd said tonight. I know we had because I'd triple-checked the text. The girl turned around and looked at me, not with malice, not with pity, but with the kind of detached curiosity people have when they realize they've walked into someone else's unfinished business. I don't remember what I said. I don't know if I said anything at all. I just remember putting the wine bottle on his kitchen counter and walking out. He didn't follow me. He didn't call. He didn't even text until 2 days later, and all he wrote was, "Sorry about the mix-up." The mix-up. I spent that night on the cold tile of the sublet bathroom floor, dry heaving until bile came up. It wasn't heartbreak, it was self-recognition. I saw myself with horrifying clarity, a woman who abandoned the man who loved her for the man who never claimed her. And in that nauseating silence between breaths, I finally understood, I had not been chosen. I had been convenient. The next week, I emailed Daniel. Not to confess. Not to beg. Not even to apologize properly. I told myself I just wanted closure. I told him I hoped he was okay. I told him I was thinking of him. It was selfish, an emotional knock on a door I no longer had the right to approach. He responded the next day with 4 sentences. "I'm healing. I hope you are too. Please don't contact me again. Take care." He used to write me birthday letters so long I'd cry halfway through. Now I was 4 sentences. 4 sentences more than I deserved. I didn't reply. But I didn't move on either. Not really. I kept thinking there'd be a moment, some cosmic twist where I'd run into him and he'd see the remorse in me and something in him would soften. That maybe I could explain, not to be taken back, but to be understood. To not be the villain in his memory. But life doesn't hand out those little redemptions just because you're crushed under the weight of what you've done. The thing about regret is that it doesn't hit you like a car crash. Not the real kind. Not the kind that rewires your soul. It seeps in like water through rotten wood, slow, patient, inevitable. It doesn't ask your permission. It just takes. After Daniel's 4-sentence reply, I kept telling myself I'd accept it. I'd let him move on, and I'd try to do the same. But that wasn't the truth. What I really did was wait. I waited for a moment that would never come, some invisible opening where I could step back into his life, not as his fiancée, not even necessarily as someone he loved, but as someone he didn't despise. As someone he could look at without remembering how thoroughly I betrayed him. But waiting is its own form of torture. Especially when the person you're waiting for has already chosen to stop looking in your direction. Months passed. Then a year. Then more. And somewhere in that stretch of time, everyone else seemed to move forward like they were on an airport conveyor belt, and I was the only one standing still. Friends got married. People from college started having kids. My co-workers talked about joint mortgages and weekend getaways and dinner parties with couples whose names sounded like they belonged on embroidered hand towels. And me? I turned 31 alone in a sublet with beige walls and a dishwasher that sounded like it was dying. The wine I bought tasted cheap because it was. I got exactly 2 birthday texts, one from my sister, one from an old co-worker who probably sent the same message to everyone in her contact list. That night, I opened Instagram for the first time in months. I told myself I just wanted background noise while I ate grocery store sushi in silence. But I searched his name. I wish I could lie and say I didn't. But I did. Daniel hadn't blocked me, but he hadn't posted anything since before I left him. His account looked frozen in time, like a fossilized version of the life we used to share. For a second, I wondered if that meant something, if maybe he was stuck too. Maybe I hadn't ruined just myself. Maybe I'd broken him in a way that no one else could step into. That delusion lasted maybe 3 minutes. Because that's when I saw the tagged photo. He was at a small gathering, someone's apartment, dim lights, wine glasses, board games on a coffee table. He looked different in a way I only understood hours later, peaceful. Not happy in some flashy, performative way, just settled. There was a woman next to him in the picture, not touching him, not leaning into him, but you could see in her posture that she was comfortable around him. And he around her. I clicked her profile. I don't know why I had no right. But I did. Her name was Claire. She was a teacher. Brown hair, kind eyes, not overly polished, not trying too hard. The kind of woman who looked like she read books before bed and remembered people's favorite flowers. I stared at her pictures so long my phone screen dimmed twice. And the horrible realization hit me, not with anger, not with jealousy, but with something worse, quiet certainty. He was going to love her the way he once loved me. And she wasn't going to run. I wish I could say that was the moment I changed. That some deep internal shift happened and I started rebuilding my life with clarity and purpose. But that's not how it went. Regret doesn't make you better. Sometimes it just hollows you out. After that, I stopped trying to date. Not because I didn't crave affection, I did, but because everything I touched turned into a comparison I couldn't stomach. Every man who held a door or asked me a thoughtful question only reminded me of the one who used to kiss my forehead when I was too tired to talk. But the real collapse, the one that sealed everything in place, came when my mother got sick 2 years later. My relationship with my family was complicated, but Daniel used to help me carry that weight too. He was the one who reminded me to book flights for holidays, the one who made sure I didn't forget birthdays or overdue phone calls. When I was emotionally overwhelmed, he navigated the logistics I couldn't confront. He made things lighter just by existing. When my mom was diagnosed, I sat on the floor of my apartment and thought, absurdly, that if things had been different, if I hadn't left him, if I hadn't chosen chaos over devotion, he'd be sitting next to me, holding my hand, already searching for treatment centers and available flights. But that version of my life had died the night I packed my bags. I handled everything alone. Not gracefully. Not bravely. Just, functionally. My sister helped, but she had kids and a mortgage and a husband with a demanding job. I was the one who had flexibility. I was the one who didn't have to explain my absence to anyone. And that's when it hit me with blistering clarity. I had traded a future that offered me partnership for a past that offered me nothing. I had gambled stability for nostalgia. And nostalgia never wrote checks. It never held your hand in hospital waiting rooms. It never forgave you for being flawed. The hardest moment wasn't even about my mom. It was when I saw a couple in the oncology lobby, young, tired, and clearly terrified, but they were together. The woman was pale and weak. The man was filling out forms and gently keeping her water bottle full. And for a single, punishing second, I let myself imagine Daniel and me in their place, older, worn out by life, but together. Then the vision shattered because it wasn't mine to claim. Grief does something to your memory. It rewrites things. It makes even the bad times look softer. But regret? Regret sharpens everything you want to forget. It keeps the worst moments in perfect focus. I kept deleting and reinstalling dating apps without ever meeting anyone. I kept promising myself I'd start therapy but never booked the appointment. I kept telling myself I'd move to a new city and start over, but somehow years passed and I was still there, still orbiting the crater I'd made. Do you know what the worst part is? It isn't the loneliness. It isn't even the shame. It's the permanence. Because there's no apology that rewrites history. No confession that resurrects who he used to be with me. No amount of honesty that turns back the clock to the afternoon he knelt in our living room and asked me to marry him with hands that trembled like I was the most sacred thing he'd ever touched. People say time heals. Maybe it does for people who were wounded. But what about the ones who did the wounding? What about those of us who loaded the gun, aimed it at our own lives, and pulled the trigger with our eyes open? There's no healing from that. There's only learning to live with the limp. By the time I turned 36, the hollow weight of my choices had settled into a permanent ache. It wasn't sharp anymore, it was constant, like a faint ringing you never notice until you stop moving. I had lost count of the nights I spent replaying every single moment with Daniel, tracing back every decision like it was a map I could follow in reverse. But there's no path back, only the endless road forward, littered with fragments of what I threw away. Ethan had long since vanished from my life. Not dramatically, he didn't leave me. I left him. Or maybe I abandoned myself, because nothing in that relationship ever existed except my need to prove something to a version of me that I didn't like. When the thrill faded, when I realized he never really loved me, I couldn't even summon the energy to mourn. It was like a candle that burned too fast and left only smoke and wax in my hands. He was gone. And Daniel. Daniel was everywhere, in every memory, every hope, every lesson I hadn't learned until it was too late. I remember the day I saw him again after all those years. I wasn't looking for him. I was walking downtown, head down, earbuds in, trying to make the city noises fill the empty space inside me. And then he was across the street, laughing at something someone had said, the same soft smile I'd once believed belonged to me. He was older, yes, better in a way I couldn't touch, but he was still him. And he was not mine. I froze. My body betrayed me with every instinct I had, to run, to call out, to collapse and apologize. But I didn't. Because I had nothing left to offer. Not my words, not my heart, not my time. I had given all of that to myself, to Ethan, to my selfish desire, and the world had taken it and spat it back in my face. He didn't see me. Or if he did, he didn't care. He kept walking, arm in arm with Claire, the woman I had silently compared myself to for years, the woman who had taken the life I had no right to anymore. She smiled at him, and he smiled back like he always had, with trust, with devotion, with the kind of love I had destroyed. I felt it all at once, grief, shame, a hollow rage at myself. And yet I couldn't even hate them. Daniel had moved on, he deserved happiness. Claire didn't know the role she played in my ruin, and she didn't deserve it. The only person left to blame was me, the woman who had chosen the wrong man, the wrong thrill, the wrong life. I went home that day and didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed and let tears fall freely, uncurbed. I whispered apologies into the dark, apologies that would never reach the man who loved me more than he deserved, the man I had abandoned for vanity and nostalgia, the man whose life had continued while mine had hollowed out around me. There is a particular cruelty in watching the person you ruined thrive while you flounder in the ruins of your own choices. It's not just that he's happy, it's that he's happy with someone who treats him as he treated me, with patience, with respect, with love that never wavered. And me? I am left with the knowledge that no matter what I do, no matter what I achieve, no matter how many apologies I whisper into the dark, I will never reclaim that life. I will never reclaim that man. He has a future now that I will never be part of, and every day is a reminder of the one I destroyed. Sometimes I imagine telling him everything. How I left, how I wanted more, how I thought I was justified, how I realized too late that I was the villain in my own story. But then I remember the 4 sentences he once sent me: I'm healing. I hope you are too. Please don't contact me again. Take care. And I know that speaking would be selfish, a final attempt to make him acknowledge my existence. A way to put myself back into a world that I had no right to enter. I have tried dating. Briefly. I have tried therapy. I have tried changing jobs, cities, routines, anything to shake off the shadow of what I've done. But the past isn't a shadow that can be outrun. It's a constant companion. It whispers reminders in every intimate moment, every place I hoped might feel like a new beginning. Nothing is enough to erase the memory of what I chose over the man who chose me. And the bitterest truth? The regret doesn't fade. It doesn't soften. It doesn't even turn into wisdom unless I accept it. And I do. I accept it fully, with every fiber of my being. I destroyed the one person who was steadfast, who was loyal, who loved me for exactly who I was. I chose someone else, someone fleeting, someone unworthy of the faith Daniel placed in me. I have carried that weight for years, and I will carry it until the day I die. Sometimes I catch myself imagining the life I could have had. The apartment filled with quiet laughter. The dinners cooked together. The children I never held. The family he would have allowed me to build because he would have trusted me with it. And then I remind myself, it's gone. He is gone. And I am left with only memories and the aching knowledge of my own selfishness. There is no closure in regret, no solace in confession. Only the slow, inexorable realization that we are responsible for our own mistakes, that the people we hurt don't owe us forgiveness, and that some things, once lost, are gone forever. So this is my confession. I left the man who chose me. I chased someone who never would. I destroyed my future for the illusion of passion, for the ghost of what might have been. And now, decades later, I live with it every single day. I cannot apologize enough. I cannot undo it. I can only exist, a cautionary tale written in scars and memories, forever haunted by the love I abandoned.